register my personal note of warmest congratulations on this landmark moment. 2 decades entertaining, informing, provoking the unsuspecting British public as they listen to your show. It is an extraordinary achievement. And, there's no wonder you're a legend in British broadcasting.
And Nick Ferrari will be speaking to the Labour leader for Call Keir next on LBC. In the city, the FTSE 100 a short time ago reopened at 77.23. The pound buys $1.26 and €1.15. LBC weather, most places a bit brighter today with sunny spells, but showers persisting in the north and east, a high of 9 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Thomas Watt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call Keir. Put your questions to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
It is LBC, and it's 1 minute after 9 on Friday, the 5th of January, and it is Call Keir, and we're coming to your calls in just a second. The leader of the Labour Party in the studios with me. Thank you very much for coming in, Sir Keir. Just a quick one from me before we go to Chris. You're going to be the first caller. You made your speech yesterday. You talked about Project Hope. You talked about mission government. Do you think it was mission accomplished for you yesterday?
Oh, very much, yes. I wanted to weld the hope to the reassurance that we've already built, I think, in the Labour Party. Had to change the Labour Party. Obviously, 4 years ago, we lost very badly. Change the Labour Party, build that reassurance, now weld together the hope of change. And it's 2024, and I've been waiting and working for 4 years to get to election year. And so to be able to stand there and deliver that message of hope and reassurance was a good thing to do.
Just before we go to the calls, some of the newspaper commentators, some of the sketch writers say it was a little threadbare, a little thin on detail. Even The Guardian, which is not, I think you will accept, is not a right-leaning newspaper, says your broad brush strokes are right, but where's the meat on the bone?
Yeah. So, Nick, I've been in this job 4 years now. I've got used to the cycle. The first year, it sort of took me a bit by surprise.
Well, it was COVID. You couldn't see anyone.
No, but so every year about New Year, people say, well, what do you stand for? What have you got to say for yourself? So then I set out last year, 5 big speeches, 5 massive missions about how we're going to grow the economy, raise living standards, how we're going to go for clean power 2030, how we're going to make the NHS fit for the future, how we're going to have safer streets and give young people their opportunities. Massive speeches. Everybody goes, whoa, there's a lot there. Can it be achieved? And look at the detail of it, and we put the detail out, backing papers and all the rest of it. And then you get to the next New Year and say, oh, why don't you tell us what you stand for? Look, you can disagree with what I'm saying, but you can't really say after 5 big mission launches, big speeches, backing documents, and, when we say things like highest sustained growth in the G7, higher living standards everywhere, people say, ooh, that's hard. When I say within the crime mission, we want to halve violence against women and girls, that's really, really tough. I mean, I worked on this as chief prosecutor. You can argue with that, but you can't really say we don't know what you stand for, you haven't said anything out, unless you've just really not paid very much attention to what's been said over the last year or so. Nick, I can't not say happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you,
I've heard all the various people coming on your show. It's been brilliant so far. I know you've got some still to come, but
thank you.
Real congratulations. I'm really pleased to be on the day of the 20th anniversary.
Good to have you, Claire.
I can't imagine what it's like to get up at 4:30
5:30
every weekday for 20 years. It is.
I'm in a lot of debt. That's all I'm going to say. I've got a lot of bills to pay. Let's leave that. Thank you, Keir. I appreciate the words. Right, let's put you in front of the voters. Chris is in Burnham-on-Sea. Chris, your call to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Good morning, Chris.
Morning, Sir Keir. My question is, you say that you want to see lower income tax for working people. Therefore, will you commit to raising the income tax threshold to benefit the lowest paid in society?
Well, Chris, let me reiterate the first part of your question. I do want to see a lower tax burden on working people. I think the tax burden now is higher than it's been since the Second World War, and people are really feeling the pinch. So I do want to do that. What I'm not going to do, Chris, is make unfunded, unaffordable promises that I can't keep. And I'll tell you for why. That's what Liz Truss did whenever it was, in the autumn of the year before last. She said, I'm going to do tax breaks, tax cuts. She didn't fund them. She didn't show how they could be afforded. And the economy crashed, and people are still paying the price. Anybody who's listening to this who's on a mortgage is probably or likely to be paying more on their mortgage because of that. So I'm not going to do that. But Chris, I'm not going to walk away from the challenge, because for me, the way through this is to grow our economy, to make sure that we create more wealth and that living standards are driven up. That does two things, Chris. Firstly, it gives you more money in your pocket in the first place because your living standards are going up. Secondly, it creates more of a buffer for a government to then adjust the tax that working people pay. So I know that's slightly frustrating in the sense you can't say here, well, look, we're going to cut tax on day one, but I'm not going to make the mistake that Liz Truss made, Chris, because in the end, it's working people who pay. I mean, Liz Truss is now, appointing, or the government's appointing to the House of Lords the people who advised her how to crash the economy. Working people are still paying the price. I'm never, ever going to let that happen under a Labour government.
Let me just ask you one thing, and then I'll come back to Chris on this particular point. You don't need reminding, the tax take is at the highest there's been for 70 years. One paper today says there'll be no tax cut under Labour, hints Starmer. Is that correct then? The tax take will stay at 70 years?
No, Nick, I want to bring it down for working people. And the way to do that is to grow the economy and make sure that we've got...
How do you grow the economy, Sir Keir?
Oh, well, you work with the private sector to invest in the future.
What does that mean? Is this your green energy plan?
Yeah, let me just talk this through, Nick, because global investors around the world have been locked into quite intensive discussions with me now. And the discussion always goes the same way, which is we have got money to invest in the UK. And we quite like investing in the UK.
Why?
They like it because, by and large, we've been stable. And we've got an extremely good judicial system. So they know it's safe.
Even something like HS2? What did that do to their ambitions?
But when I say, well, why aren't you investing now? They say it's the chopping and the changing. Right. We haven't got a clear strategy. We've been through 5 prime ministers. 1 minute they're going for net zero on a particular date. The next day they're not. That is not a good environment for us to invest. So we need to create the environment of stability, absolute clarity. I want a mission-driven government, purpose-driven government. The point of that is to be able to say, over 5 or 10 years, this is what we're going to achieve. Let's take clean power. There are plenty of investors who want to come on board for that project to make sure that we can have clean...
With £28 billion in their pockets?
Clean power. I mean, most of that, most of the investment that's needed will come from the private sector. But the private sector isn't saying to me, where's the 28 billion? They're saying to me, do you understand the tough decisions you'll have to make on planning for this to work? Do you understand what you'll have to do with the national grid? I'll give you one example, Nick, that sticks in my mind because it's so vivid. I went to Scunthorpe Steelworks. You know, we make steel, but we're in danger of losing this. The steel workers know that carbon-free steel is the future. They can see France and Sweden getting the orders, so they want to do it. They have got an electric arc furnace that they think they can get going by 2027. Need a bit of match funding. That's the investment from the government. Then they tell me the grid, the national grid, has given them a switch-on date of 2034. It will not work and we will lose steel. So, you know, there are plenty of ways to grow and give our economy resilience if you have a government that rolls up its sleeves, works with investors, understands the problem and sticks with the programme. The problem the year before last, we had 4 chancellors and 4 budget. No investor is going to put money into a country that's going through that kind of chop and change.
And are you ready to borrow to invest?
Yes, where it is sensible and appropriate to borrow to invest. But that has to be a catalyst for the private sector. So what I want is, for every £1 the government puts in, I want 3 out of the private sector to match it in the projects that we need.
And who will deem it sensible, that borrowing? How will that be determined? You use the word sensible.
Well, the government of the day has to deem it sensible. But again, Nick,
but what criteria?
Let me walk that through, because what I've said to the investors that we need to come alongside us, let's say for some of the renewable energy, I've said we're not going to put a lump sum money in here. I need you to tell me where the pinch points are. Is the money needed for the skills in the first place? Is it to prove the concept? Is it to make sure that there's a bit of de-risking at the end of the exercise? So this isn't a dead weight amount of money. It's an agile investment working with business. And I know people get frustrated that I like to work through the detail, but I've had these discussions at many levels now with those that we hope to partner with to say, how's this going to work in practice? What do you want a government to put in? Because, Nick, in the end, I want to win an election for a purpose, and that is to change our country for the better. Therefore, I need to answer all the questions. I need to know from those we want to work with, how does government really work with you on this?
Lastly on this, because there's so many others to get through, in a recent interview, your number 2 in the Treasury, Darren Jones, said this about the funding of the £28 billion green growth plan we've discussed. Quotes, if we're successful in growing the economy in the way we think we will be, that creates room for more investment. If we're not, the fiscal rules come first and are non-negotiable. Can you guarantee my listeners that figure, this 28 billion, will be reached at some point in your first term?
Nick, let me set it out in this way, in direct answer to your question.
OK.
First is, we'll ramp up to the 28 billion, and we've said in the second half of the Parliament.
So you will hit 28 billion by at least the second half?
That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's subject to the money the government's already put in, so we need to look at what they've already put in. Thirdly, and importantly, in answer to your question, it's subject to our fiscal rules. Which
so it's an ambition.
One of the rules is that debt has to be falling as a percentage of our economy.
So you can't guarantee it.
Look, I'm confident.
No, I hear you.
I'm confident. We're talking about where we might be in 2027. Yes. So, being a careful and cautious former lawyer, I know that the world can change. 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't know we were going to hit COVID or Ukraine.
Right.
But I'm confident that we can get to that figure. But in the end, the fiscal rule comes first.
So it's a gold-plated ambition, not a pledge.
It's a confident ambition.
Okay. We must move to other matters. Tal in Nottingham. You're on the radio, Tal. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Tal.
Thank you for taking questions, Keir.
That's all right. How are you?
I'm good. My question is, we all know that junior doctors were paid 35% more in real terms in 2008. But junior doctors who were thrown into the pandemic in 2020 were paid then 12% more in real terms than now. So were junior doctors overpaid in 2020 when they were in the pandemic, or are they massively underpaid now?
Tal, I think that the doctors and other health staff.
I think Tal is a junior doctor, just for your reference.
No, Tal, and cards on the table. My wife works in the NHS, Tal, as you may know, so I'm very close to all of this. There is no doubt that the doctors and other health workers in the NHS make a good case that they are entitled to a wage increase. And I've seen the way the junior doctors put it. Nobody wants to see the industrial action that's happening. I'm sure you don't. No junior doctor does. I personally think there's room for agreement. And what's frustrating me at the moment, Tal, is that the government's almost hinting there's room for agreement. I think the doctors are hinting there's room for agreement. In the last few days, the argument seems to have reduced to who's going to get in the room first. Even today, I think I'm right in saying the health secretary is saying, I'm ready to talk, but these are the conditions. I would just say get in the room and get on with it.
She'll talk if strikes are called off. Sorry to interrupt.
Honestly, Nick.
Is she right so to do?
No, just get on with it. Don't hint there's a deal to be done. Look at the door and the room you're going to go and do the deal in and say, but I'm not going in first. You've got to go in first. It's just, after all this...
This would not happen on a Labour watch.
get in the door, get round the room, get this deal over the line and get the NHS back working, because millions of people are suffering as a result of this industrial action. Don't berate the junior doctors, talk to them, get in the room, sort it out.
Would a Labour government offer more money, more than the 11.8%?
Well, we would get in the room and negotiate.
I hear that, sir, but...
We'll get in the room and negotiate.
Yes.
There's more than money at stake here. But what I'm not going to do is hypothetically say what we might do if we were going in the room. And frankly, Nick, even if we were in government and I was on your show and you'd ask me the same question,
Okay.
I wouldn't, because nobody is going to negotiate. If you're negotiating for buying a house, you don't answer the question as you start negotiating. What's your bottom line?
One thing I do need to get you on. You're probably aware that it's reported there have been more than 20 requests for junior doctors to leave picket lines on what are called patient safety grounds. This was an agreement done between hospital trusts and the BMA. They have reportedly been rejected by the BMA, who are suggesting they're not the right criteria. Should a junior doctor be told she can't go and treat a patient?
I think I'm troubled by this, Nick, because up until now, these agreements have worked pretty well, where people have come off the picket line and it's worked well. I don't quite know why this is broken down in the last few days, it seems. I don't know all the details, but I am concerned about that. But up until now, to be fair to everybody, and in particular to the junior doctors, they have come off picket lines. They have done what is necessary to make sure that there is mitigation for the obvious concerns that arise. I don't quite know why now this row has come about.
But it's a concern.
It is a concern, of course.
We've only done 2 days. There are 4. I know we're day 3, but there are effectively 4 days still to go, lastly, on this, Sir Keir.
Which is, again, back to my point, get in the room and sort this out.
OK. Tal, thank you for the work
you do.
Tal. Yeah, indeed. And let's hope peace breaks out soon. Dolly is in Uxbridge, and you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Dolly.
Good morning, both of you.
Hello.
Morning, Dolly.
I just wanted to know, if you do get into power, will you be putting a vote to assisted dying? And if not, will you be improving palliative care in this country?
All right, this is in the light, I imagine, of course, the intervention by Dame Esther Ranson who sadly has stage 4 lung cancer towards the end of last year, Sir Keir.
No, and she and her family make a very powerful case. Dolly, you may or may not know that when I was Chief Prosecutor, the Director of Public Prosecutions, I looked at every single case that the police investigated of assisted dying. Some of them involved Dignitas, people going to Switzerland. Others involved different ways in which people had taken their own lives. So I've looked at probably more files and more circumstances here than many others. And I, as Chief Prosecutor, drew up guidelines to try to make the law we've got work reasonably well, on the basis that we had to protect people from being exploited, of course, absolutely. But on the other hand, there were obvious cases of compassionate acts, usually by loving family members, in accordance with the wishes of somebody who wanted to end their own life. Now, we tried to make the current law work. I, Dolly, feel that we ought to actually change the law. It shouldn't really be for the prosecutor to try and make the law work when it doesn't really. It would be better for Parliament to actually change the law. So I am an advocate of a change to the law. Obviously, that change has to be very carefully crafted. And in answer to your question, I think the best route would probably be a private member's bill, which is normally dealt with, Dolly, on a Friday in Parliament. And yes, I would be open to making time for that. I think it should be a free vote because...
Do you vote for a change in the law?
Yes, subject to it being the right change, obviously.
Of course, closer scrutiny.
Yes.
But your broadly sentiment would be to vote for.
To vote for, to ensure that Parliament decided what were the appropriate cases, not, I hope I did a good job as Chief Prosecutor, but it shouldn't really be, the prosecutor who makes those decisions without a better framework from Parliament.
Dolly, thank you for that. Andrew, coming to you in a moment. I want to take a question from one of the texts that have come in. Now, you've been very busy. You've probably not seen this extraordinary TV series about the post office scandal. Lucy in Putney has said, as more shocking revelations have emerged about the post office scandal on ITV this week, does Sir Keir agree that, I will read this, the hopeless Sir Ed Davey has more questions to answer when he was Postal Minister? Just to remind listeners, it wasn't all on Sir Ed's watch in the coalition, but part of it was when he was Postal Minister, and the suggestion that someone, in fact, emerged with a CBE, a gong from all of this. Sir Keir.
Yeah, Nick, I did see a bit of the ITV programme, which was very powerful.
Phenomenal.
I should also say I know personally some of those that were caught up with this. One of them is the brother is a very close friend of mine, and I know the mental impact it has had on him and others. So I feel this very strongly. It is a gross, very wide-ranging miscarriage of justice. Not only was it wrong in the first place, but the Post Office, when it began to be obvious that it was wrong, didn't do the right thing, which is to say, we got this wrong, let's sort it out. And so I do think all of those involved at the time have questions to answer.
Including Sir Ed. I've got to direct you towards that specific question from Lucy.
Yeah, look, I think he has got questions, and I think he is answering them. I haven't seen... Well, he said,
He said, I've got regret. I should have done more.
I can't answer for him, and I haven't spent as much time as I should analysing his answers, to be honest, because I've been on other things. But all of those who were involved do need to answer some basic questions. I think there's one more thing I'd like to just put on the table.
Ahead.
There's because this has had, people's lives, their livelihoods.
Well, not everyone came through.
Not everyone came through. Many of those that came through had severe mental and health issues as a result, and I know that personally. But compensation has been set aside for them. It should have been paid in December. The Treasury have put the money aside, so it's not unavailable, but it hasn't all been paid.
That's outrageous.
So, of course, those involved should be held to account. But I say to the government now, get on with it. Do at least that bit right.
Let's move on to other calls. Andrew's in Warrington, and you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Andrew. Good morning.
Hi, Nick. You all right? Hi, Keir. How you doing?
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, it's good to meet you. Just a question that's been really important in my life at the moment, Sir Keir, is the child benefit threshold. I currently have 5 children, and I've got a career where I'm earning. I've just got a pay rise. So I'm earning $60,000 a year.
Well done.
My wife's a stay-at-home mum, so I'm the earner for the whole family. So I've just been taxed £360 a month from having 5 children, which has put me off having more children. And it's also quite a burden during the cost of living. I'm just wondering, as Gordon Brown introduced this tax, and I've currently always voted Tory, but I'm swaying. Would you look at increasing the threshold or make it more fair? For instance, my sister-in-law earns $49 a year, and her partner earns $49 a year, and they still get full child benefit. And I don't think it's a fair system.
Yeah.
Secure.
Andrew, I do think that we need to look at all of these payments again. I think that in the end, the government has raised them in accordance with the usual rules in terms of how inflation is measured. But we do need to look again, Andrew. But and I sympathise with the situation that you're in, and many people are in, working hard and trying to make ends meet. But Andrew, I just want to say this, and if we are privileged to come in to serve, we are going to inherit a complete mess, an economic mess. And what I can't do now, although many politicians attempted, is make promises I can't keep. And therefore, I'm not going to say, yes, we're going to raise it by X amount now. I understand what you're saying. I absolutely understand that any incoming Labour government has to have an anti-poverty strategy, as the last Labour government did. But we've got to make sure that we get our economy stable again, working again, in order to provide the foundation for that. But, Andrew, what I can say is one thing that's important in politics to me is who do you have in your mind's eye when you make decisions? And I have working people who are struggling to make ends meet. And my determination is to ensure that we can do everything we can to improve their lives, their opportunities and their aspirations. But no promises that I can't meet, Andrew.
Andrew, thank you. I'm sure we'll be speaking with Sir Keir closer to the actual time, so he might have more numbers to share with you closer to the moment. Let's go back to the texts, emails and tweets, or X's, whatever. This one comes in from Mayor in North London. Nick was discussing the idea of a post-Hamas conflict plan with Ben Wallace in Gaza. Ben Wallace was rather sceptical. What does Keir think? This is the Yoav Gallant plan that you might have heard of, Sir Keir. This is the Israeli Defence Minister who suggests that it would effectively all security in the post-conflict Gaza would be under the remit of the Israeli Defence Services, but of course there would be Palestinian people there.
Well, let's work this through, because I saw that and I heard your interview with Ben. I like Ben, by the way. It's a bit disparaging about me in points, but I genuinely like Ben, and we worked on a good cross-party basis. But look, at the moment, what we're seeing is a horror that's gone on for the last few months. Far too many civilians being killed in Gaza, far too many people displaced, and not enough aid going in. And we all want to get to a ceasefire. So the question is, how do we get there? I think we need a humanitarian truce. We did have a short truce earlier on. Let's get back to that immediately. Let's use that for intense diplomacy to deal with the issues, the obvious issues. Hamas has got to release the hostages. Aid has got to get in, and to work our way to a political process for a two-state solution. That will include, within that intense diplomacy...
Where does the land come from for a two-state solution, Sakir? Who's going to give up the land?
Well, the land, I mean, there has to be an agreement what the two states would be. I agree with that.
But who's giving up the land?
But already we've got the ability to stake out where the land would be for the two states. I agree that there's an argument about where the borders would be. Well, let's get on with that discussion, that argument. That needs to be an intense negotiation, but we can't give up on the two-state solution. But Nick, just in answer to the specific problem, within that, there has to be the question, what do we do about Gaza? We cannot have Israeli occupation. We cannot have people displaced who can't go back to where the Palestinians who can't go back to where they can, because we've had, 2 million have been displaced in the last 4 months. That's intolerable. Have to go back to that. I don't think, frankly, it's for Israel to determine what happens in Gaza. There's got to be much more international agreement on this. Otherwise, it simply isn't going to work. I flew over to speak to the Emir of Qatar about this, who's centrally involved, and to the King of Jordan to talk about Arab involvement in this. Obviously, the Americans have a keen interest, and I've spoken to various prime ministers and leaders across Europe about what that looks like. Now, I'm not going to pretend there's an easy solution. If there is, we wouldn't be in the position we're in. But it cannot be simply for Israel to determine this on its own. It's got to be a much wider agreement than that.
On a related story, Sakir, noting your legal expertise, are you critical of the Metropolitan Police decision to investigate potential war crimes in the Israel-Hamas conflict? This has been criticised by leading Jewish barrister Simon Meyerson, KC, and others, including, of course, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Is it the job of the Met?
I was surprised to see this. I don't know the details. I saw Boris Johnson had written about it, which is how I knew about it, frankly. It is a police operational decision. I don't know actually what the basis of it is. I do know that...
You're an MP in London. I don't need to tell you. We're having teenagers fatally stabbed in this city. We're having people attacked for their jackets and their watches. Is the Met really looking at crimes in Gaza, Sakir?
Nick, very sadly, one of those, the 16-year-old boy, was in my constituency. So I'm
acutely aware.
Acutely aware.
So I put it to you again. Is it the role of the Met to be looking at potential crimes on either side?
Well, look, I was surprised at the decision. It is, in the end, a decision for the Metropolitan Police, for which they will have to be held to account. My caution is that whenever I was involved in anything to do with criminal law, politicians will sort of wade all over it without knowing very much about what was actually going on. And that wasn't always helpful. But, I mean, to meet your central point, I'm one boy in my constituency, one in the next door constituency, a man in the next door constituency that is a constituent of mine. So in the last 10 days, my office and I have been dealing with 2 of these fatal stabbings. And that brings home to all of us the reality of these awful knife crimes.
Condolences to the people you've been working with. Let's get one call in, well, at least one more call. Linda's in Norwich. Linda, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, Sir Keir.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. I just wanted you to clarify something for me. You've said that you would remove the VAT relief status on private schools, but as far as I'm aware, you haven't said that you will completely remove their charitable status. And if I'm right about that, that means that every time someone gives a large sum of money to a school, the taxpayer's having to subsidise that with gift aid relief, and that's a big percentage.
Yeah, Linda, you're absolutely right. We do want to start collecting the VAT on fees for private schools, but we don't intend to change the charitable status because we don't think we need to do so. Linda, the reason that we're going to deal with VAT on private school fees is not because we're anti-private school in the slightest. I understand why parents work hard to send their children to private schools. It's just that at the moment we do not have expert teachers in our state secondary schools in critical subjects like maths, etc. We need 6,000 or so recruited, and I have to answer the question, how do we pay for that? And so that money would be directly used, that the tax that's collected there, directly used to fund those expert teachers in state schools, so that it doesn't make a difference whether you go to a state school or a private school. But everybody gets an equal chance.
But Sakir, one head teacher in Berkshire warned your policy would see a third of current parents priced out. Will the schools be ready to take children? Do you know how many children attend private schools in this country?
Nick, just on that report, because we have obviously looked at reports on this, and all the reports show that it's unlikely that parents will take their children out of schools.
Okay, I mean, that is a head teacher, but I'll take
that is a head teacher. But
okay.
Nick, as you know, I'll get criticised for a number of things, but one is doing the detail. Obviously, I asked for information reports.
Private schools?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the number, Nick. But I have looked at this question of will it lead to children leaving private schools and going to state schools, and the answer to that, on all the evidence I've seen, is no, that it will. The second thing I would just add to this is, this is the VAT paid by schools. They don't have to pass this on to the parents. They can do it in other ways. But in the end, Nick, I mean, look.
Do you not think, you said you're a man for detail, shouldn't you know how many children attend private schools with a policy such as this, Sakir?
Look, Nick, I've seen the figure, I haven't got it at the tip of my...
It's 550,000.
All right, 550,000. I've got, but the principle is this, which is, can we get to a place where it doesn't matter whether your child goes to a state school or a private school? I don't think it should. I'm not going to tolerate secondary school, state schools not having the teachers they need, and I'm going to answer the question how we got the money to pay for it.
Okay, final question. I'm afraid it's going to be from me. It's, again, from your experience as DPP, you'll be aware Prince Andrew has been reported to police over the alleged sexual abuse of a 17-year-old girl in London after claims were repeated in those newly released court papers in the United States. Do the police need to investigate? Sir Keir Starmer.
Look, I think wherever there's a complaint made, it's inevitable that it should be looked at. I mean, we have to start with the victims here and look at what allegations have been made. I've seen the headlines on this, not the detail, Nick, but frankly, whoever it is, where there are allegations, credible allegations made, then of course they should be looked at.
You know even better than I need have to say, of course, Prince Andrew denies all those allegations. So can I welcome, thank you, and can I wish you and your family a very happy New Year, and thanks for coming to the studio.
Happy New Year.
And I look forward to seeing you in my 21st year on the job. Thank you very much indeed. LBC News headlines are next.
Sir Keir Starmer has rejected claims his party is light on policy in the run-up to the next general election. The Labour leader, who's been speaking to Nick, says his critics haven't been paying attention for the last 2 years. Detectives investigating the death of Harry Pittman in North London on New Year's Eve have made 2 more arrests. The 16 and 17-year-old boys are being questioned on suspicion of murder. And political leaders past and present have been helping LBC mark a broadcasting milestone.
Real congratulations. I'm really pleased to be on the day of the 20th anniversary.
Good to have you, Keir.
I can't imagine what it's like to get up at 5:30 every weekday for 20 years.
It is exactly 20 years since Nick started hosting The Breakfast Show. LBC weather. Most places brighter with sunny spells, some showers in the north and east, a high of 9 degrees.
This is LBC.